when a specific person fails in some way, that hurts them, especially if it's a leader. I think there's an intuitive understanding that that's one person, they're imperfect just like I am. But when the institution itself then goes to the lengths to cover it, that becomes so damaging because now a person goes, I can't even trust the church.
I was crying this morning for how much I was grieved by the sadness I felt over this. And I just felt so much anger for the people who have been hurt or left things or like made real huge life changes and choices because of prophetic words that they publicly received, just to find out it's a scam.
Maybe the angle that we haven't discussed as much is the institutional instinct to hide rather than expose sin and what the reasons for that are. Welcome to the Provoke and Inspire podcast, where we look at culture and we ask, what would Jesus think and what would Jesus do? And today, joining me as always is David Pierce, my dad, and Chad Johnson. What's up, fellas?
It's great to be here with everyone.
Pony hangs.
Yes. So look, today we are going to dive right into another very challenging conversation, and we're going to ask the very necessary question: why does the church so often hide sin instead of exposing it? And unfortunately, this conversation is prompted by yet another very recent example of this happening once again. So let me just give you guys the context, and then we will react. So over the last few weeks, a major controversy has come to light involving Shawn Bolz, a well-known prophetic minister who is frequently invited to speak and prophesy at Bethel Church. Excuse me. A long, detailed video released in January by Christian apologist Mike Winger. It's kind of a winner in the sense. Alleged that Bolz engaged in fraudulent prophetic practices using publicly accessible personal information, often from social media, and then presenting it as supernatural words of knowledge. And then, of course, on top of that, there was sexual misconduct and harassment charges or allegations by many of his team members over a long period of time. So, of course, there's that, which is bad enough. But then Bethel leadership has since publicly responded and apologized, admitting that they had made mistakes and failures in the way that they handled this. They first learned about the sexual harassment allegations and some of the integrity that was lacking in Bolz's prophetic words all the way back in 2019. According to them, they confronted him privately and did eventually stop platforming him, but never communicated clearly with their congregation or the wider Christian community about what they knew and why they distanced himself from him. And so recently, after sort of this Mike Winger content started coming out, there was all these statements from the key leaders like Bill Johnson and Chris, is it Vallotton? How do you say his last name?
Vallotton. It's a soft R. Valentin.
They acknowledged in a joint statement that they did not act with sufficient transparency, clarity, or urgency, and that their silence hurt and scared people. They expressed regret for not speaking up sooner and are now instituting new accountability measures. So you got this horrible situation with Shawn Bolz. Then you've got the church that was associated with him, that platformed him, that would often have him come speak, finding out about all of this stuff in 2019 and then not making it public. And so I wanted to ask this key question that I led with, which is, why do churches hide sin instead of exposing it? Chad, what do you think? What is your reaction to this crazy story? I know you spent hours and hours, like you said, kind of in the rabbit hole or rabbit trail.
I am more prepared. Yeah, I am more prepared for this conversation than probably any we've had in recent times, just because of how much time it took to go through that video that I don't know if you sent it or if I found it or how. I don't. Yeah, the Mike Winger video.
Yeah, that dude is very, very thorough. But
even on 2x speed, it still took me 3 hours, which is
that's wild.
But I mean, it's really sad because I guess the best way I can answer your question is that it's the domino effect. Like the fear of calling someone out publicly is the way it will cause for others to be affected. And when I say others, I mean like the others, the insiders, those who are closest and in leadership and ministry leaders, and in this case, very well-known, very well-established ministry leaders and ministries, that if maybe the domino effect isn't the exact parallel I should draw, but maybe it's more like the stain of being splashed with oil that just doesn't come off your clothing. You know, like if you get hit with hot oil, it's probably going to burn a hole in your shirt, which has happened to me, and it basically ruins your shirt because you just can't. You know, it leaves stains that you can't, do anything about. So I think it's that. I think it's that if we call someone out, then we will, by default, selfishly and very likely be also affected in a negative way.
Yeah. David, what was your reaction?
Well,
you guys were so quiet after I saw that. It was like it was so good that you didn't even know how to process it. That's cool.
I have so many reactions, but like one of the things that Bill Johnson said is that he believes in people and he doesn't want to, it's a weakness where he believes in people. So what did he call it? Unrighteous belief, or I can't remember. He used to.
Yeah, no, I remember him saying that too. And I thought that was a really good point. And
I think, I don't know. I think part of the temptation can be, because I've preached on this often, what Jesus said in Matthew 7:7, where he said, do not judge or you too will be judged. And for the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. So one of the things that I hated when I was doing the research on this was all these, I mean, I'm really naive, but there's like, I didn't know that there's all these YouTube channels just on exposing Christian leaders by these so-called other Christian leaders. You know what I mean?
It's a thing, it seems like.
Well, man, I mean, I know that a lot of people, I mean, I'm naive. I didn't realize that there was this whole industry based on exposing Christian leaders. I even saw this one guy talking about this was a good exposure video of this leader, but this one was not so good. And I'm like, what the heck is going on here? So I think that can be it's wrong, but I think that can be one of the reasons that someone would hesitate to want to expose someone publicly, is because you don't want to do that.
No, but you don't have that kind of luxury with that kind of platform. You know, we often talk about on this podcast the verse in James where it says that not many should want to be leaders because they'll be held to a higher standard. And that is an incredibly charitable view of why they would choose not to expose this.
I think that's one of them. I think that probably
that's one of the rationalizations.
I'm just trying to find the positive out of it.
That's not what we're trying to do here. I think
I'm negative Nancy today, and David is positive Peter.
No, but I'm not saying. I think that there's this idea that you don't want to. What it's going to cost my ministry if this comes out. And another one of the leaders from Bethel Church said, my sin was I needed to care more about character than gifting, and I think that's a big deal. You know, someone brings all this money and all, you know, so like there's this thing out there. I didn't know if you guys knew this, but there's these big Christian conferences going on everywhere.
Yeah. Is that a new thing?
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of like these. And so apparently when you have a big Christian conference, you want people to come and speak at your Christian conference that are going to draw people, right? And my understanding of this guy is he was that kind of guy. He because of his, you know, he's a famous prophecy guy. Who doesn't want that, right? And so you would bring him to your conference and it would draw all kinds of people because they would want to hear their prophecy, right?
Well, and it wasn't like I had been around prophetic circles where someone would call out something in an audience, or they would ask someone to stand up, or they'd say, hey, is there someone here that that has a mom that's like passing away, or some like detail or something. And then that person would stand up and they'd be like, I believe that God gave me a word for you. And they would share maybe some like fairly specific encouragement, and like, but God knows what you're going through, and like it's been a really hard time, but He's with you. And and everyone would kind of be like, man, that's so cool, and they all be crying, and it's so emotional and intense. But Shawn's gifting was so extreme that he was calling out street addresses, specific names of people and or places or things related to them, and experiences, like, and it was so consistent that, I mean, I would guess in some ways he would be the headliner at an event. Like it was so perceived as so supernatural that it's just like, dude, that guy comes up and starts prophesying, and it's gangbusters.
Again, I think where I want to go with this conversation is this. Look, I don't think we necessarily go down the road of the prophetic and digging into that. That might be for a different time, different conversation. To me, I think the tragedy of all this is that, look, we all know we're all imperfect. Everybody has fallen short. Even leaders fall short. We've also at many times in many ways had the discussion about why all these moral failures happen, a lack of accountability, being isolated, the trappings of fame and success. We've talked about all that, and we can do that again. Sadly, another big leader at some point will fall, and we can have that conversation again. Not that we want to be, like you, David, I always have a little bit of this aversion to that, because I don't want to be the guy that's just like TMZ Christian, and I'm just here to expose the sins and flaws of everyone. I don't like that either, but that conversation is important. And let's remember the context here. We're in full-time ministry. We have influence and platform on some level, maybe not to that level, but we certainly do. And so we are speaking within our context and within our area. But hold on. So I want to, those are valid conversations. I think maybe the angle that we haven't discussed as much is the institutional instinct, or the instinct of the institution to hide rather than expose sin, and what the reasons for that are. Because as I was reflecting on this, I read somewhere a study about the impact that this has when an institution, at the institutional level, something is covered up, and how so damaging that is. Because you think about, for just a everyday follower of Jesus, when a specific person fails in some way, that hurts them, especially if it's a leader. And that hurts them, of course, but I think there's an intuitive understanding that that's one person. That's one person. They're imperfect, just like I am. But when the institution itself then goes to the lengths to cover it, that becomes so damaging, because now a person goes, I can't even trust the church. I can't even trust Christianity in general to have my back and warn me that I'm going to this person and they're lying to me. And so I think it's really important. Yeah. Even maybe, it's like there's that verse in James, not many should consider being teachers because they'll be held to higher standard. Should there not be a verse, or is there not a verse, not many should be considered being institutions because they'll be held to an even higher standard? Because when the institution fails you in that way, the ramifications of that are so widespread. The amount of deconstruction and deconversion and hurt and abuse and trauma and everything that leads to, I don't buy the excuse like, oh, well, I just believe in people too much.
No, I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying I think that's why it happens. But I can give you a real personal example of this. I won't say names or countries, but there was a country that we were involved in, which is a very strategically really important, and we had a really great platform there. And the couple that I had go there had a moral failure. And so they came back to another country. I'm being very vague here, but anyway.
This is all Canada, by the way.
Yeah. And so I was saying, listen, you need to get this sorted. You need to go through some restitution, and you need to get counseling, but not the kind of counseling where they're a victim, but deal with their stuff, get it together, and then then we'll get you strong, and then you can go back to this other country where we had this really amazing thing happening, and we'll be good. And they said, no, we're just going back. And so then I'm in this dilemma. What am I going to do? And I thought, I can't let them just go back to this other major church in this other country and not tell the leaders what happened with this guy. You know what I mean? It's like, how would I like it if someone did that to me? In fact, someone did do that to me back in the early days. They recommended that someone in our band should play a particular role in the band, and it turned out the guy was exposing himself everywhere. It was like he had this thing where he was,
gosh,
and the leader didn't tell me. He didn't tell me about it. He just and I'm like, and so then it
knew I forgot something.
Yeah, and it came out, no pun intended. And so then we had to give him the right shoe of fellowship. But I'm like, what is that? So he didn't even this, and I thought, I am not going to do this same thing, right? To this other pastor. Yeah. And this was a huge, very big church, very influential city in Asia, right? So I call him up and I tell him, and the result
narrows it down.
Yeah, and the result of it was this. I lost my relationship with the couple because they were mad at me that I told this leader what they did, and then the leader of this church stopped being involved with me and with our mission. So so it cost me, but I think that's what we have. But we have to have enough integrity that it's going to cost us.
Yeah.
And if we say, so why don't they trust me? Well, if I would have let them go and not have told this other leader what was going on, and that they weren't repentant, they weren't willing to go through any process of restitution or whatever. What kind of leader am I? But it was hard to do. It was really hard to do.
I think, honestly, that to me is the center of the bullseye of this conversation. And Chad, I really liked your analogy of the oil, because it's absolutely true. I remember getting this really cool snowboarding jacket when I was in high school. Like, it was the best. And I loved it. And I was snowboarding. Might have been the first time I ever used it. And I get home, and it's just got this weird blotch of like what later I figured out was oil. And I don't know how I got that on the snow, but it was done. The jacket was done. It was ruined. I had to throw this jacket that I loved. I essentially had to throw it away because it had this big, ugly oil stain on it. And I think the analogy is very fitting, because there is, make no mistake, when someone who you're associated with, or who you had them on staff, or they were part of you in some significant way, there is legitimate collateral damage to other people's sins. And that's the part I think that people struggle with, because you go, I don't want to get oil on me. Exactly. And then, this is a whole nother conversation about the institution, or the machine, the business that a lot of missions and churches have become. And so you've got this payroll, and you've got this influence, and you've got these brand deals, and you've got all this stuff that you're trying to like keep afloat. And then in your head, you're going, I didn't do that. This Munter did it. He's the one who did all that stuff.
Exactly.
And the fact of the matter is, there is real collateral damage. I thought about the whole Ravi Zacharias situation, and how many good, beautiful, loving people were wrapped up and associated with him, not the least of which his kids. I mean, like, his daughter had like a major role in his ministry, the Ravi Zacharias International Ministry. That should have maybe been your first indication. But there was legit collateral damage. They lost their jobs. The ministry folded. Their opportunities probably plummeted. They had to rebuild. And yet, like you said, David, I think the core of this is, in the name of self-preservation and in the name of rationalizing the idea that, well, because I didn't do it, I shouldn't have to bear the brunt of this collateral damage. I think what you said is exactly right. You need to have the integrity to say, my first job is to disciple this flock, not to preserve my institution and reputation and financial whatever. My job is to protect the flock and make disciples, and I have to have integrity no matter the cost.
And to do the right thing was going to cost me, and that's why I didn't want to do the right thing.
Of course. Well, and
I would argue that we are uniquely positioned as a platform and a podcast to talk about topics like this, because anyone who's been listening or following along at all knows that I personally had a moral failure that compared to some of the stuff I'm watching and reading, we could be like, Chad, emotional affairs are not that bad. Looking at porn's not that bad. Masturbating's not that bad. But no, it is. It's all sin. It all grieves God's heart. It all separates me from God and others from God. And it all is a recipe for disaster that Steiger and all of us on this podcast were a part of. And I would argue what now has been, we're going on the 7th year since I admitted to Steiger or to my pastor or my wife or people around me that I was really struggling. Right. Everyone who's listened to this podcast back then, that I was really struggling. And I would argue it's been a 7-year journey that I am still paying a price for personally because of how much that decision to pursue healing has cost. And I'm not, I feel a little weird saying that because it's almost like, hey, everybody, look at me. I'm the narcissist that had a problem that's now better. I'm clearly still a work in progress, but I'm just saying we
are all works in progress.
Yeah, we are. And we've had Shawn on this podcast. We've had Todd on this podcast. We would have had Bill on this podcast. We've been so influenced by so many of these people and the gangs that they run in, that this is it's honestly just heartbreaking. Like I was crying this morning, just like how much I was grieved by the sadness I felt over this. There's a part of me, the fleshly part of me is like, ooh, like all these gory details. Wow. But I mean, that only lasts a moment. And then thankfully, the more mature part of me kicks in, and I just felt so much anger, not at these people, but anger. I mean, some of it at these people, but anger for the people who have been hurt and who have like sold their homes or married people or joined missions or left things or like made huge life changes and choices because of prophetic words that they publicly received. Jeez. And just to find out it's a scam, and
yeah, but I do think when God sees the heart of somebody, God still honors it. Even if my guess is that all of Shawn's prophetic words were scams. He probably did have.
I hope not.
I would guess that he had. Maybe he didn't, all the other stuff because he looked at one on people's social media. But he probably had that. But then
yeah. But again, this delves into the aspect of this conversation that we can touch on another time. Which, like, just to give you my 10,000 foot overview, don't get married because someone gives you a dang prophetic word.
No, I agree.
In other words, there's foolishness in that, just from a topical perspective of the weight we put on prophetic words and how they should be measured against wisdom and counselors and the Bible and your own
confirmation. The way I see prophetic words is their confirmation, not direction. So when I've had prophetic words that are really from God, it's a confirmation for me of something I've already felt, or it's helped me when I'm going through a crisis and it just said, it's okay, I'm with you, don't give up. Yeah. That kind of thing. And
give me healthy confirmation of the validity of prophecy. If just one time someone was going to be sent out, not to reach the entire world and all the nations, but just 2 people and no one will ever hear about it.
I hear one guy that gets martyred for going to that one island a few years back.
I feel that you are going to live an insignificant
You're just bitter, man,
because of minimal influence and limited power. Wow. Okay.
But God will be glorified.
You are bitter because that's the only prophetic word you've ever had.
No. So anyway, look, I think that is, of course, an entirely different topic that I think we should dig into at some point in the right way with the right guests. I don't know. We can figure that out. But the point is, obviously, I think what we're all saying here is that it's horrible what was done. This systemic problem within institutions in my mind, primarily out of self-preservation, rationalizing, covering it, hiding it, and you can call it what you want. Oh, I believe too much in people, or, oh, they already dealt with it, or it's between them and God, or I didn't want there to be all this collateral damage. Rationalize it how you want. It's ultimately about self-preservation, and it's a problem that needs to change. I think we need to have a if my church burns, but I'm going to be honest because these people need to know the truth. And that's a costly thing to say. And I can't say I've been in that position or have had to make that decision. So I can't say that with a certain degree of authority. But one other aspect of this conversation that you touched on briefly, David, that's worth digging into a touch more is you kind of criticized or were annoyed by the heresy hunting culture that exists on the internet and more broad than that. And yet, in the absence of Mike Winger's research and content that then exposed this, you probably don't get the apology. You probably don't get them coming out and saying, oh, we got caught, so now we better admit that what we did was wrong. And so in a way, God used him powerfully. So there, like with everything, it can't be all or nothing. There has to be a culture where if you're public, you are opening yourself in a way to public scrutiny. And if things become obvious that are wrong, it's okay for that to be publicly called out, right?
Yeah, I just don't want to be I just would not want that ministry. Let's put it that way. I mean, yes, it's good that, what is his thing? Wingnut?
Mike Winger.
Come on.
Mike Wingett.
Yeah.
I do think in this guy's defense, or what were you finished, David?
Yeah, Ben was mad at me because anyway.
I mean, he did put together a 6 hours of making his case, and his case is extremely compelling. And I did watch one other guy, basically I worked directly with Shawn for 7 or 8 years in his ministry, very closely with him. No, I listened to this other. yeah. No, that'd be a weird. You guys didn't even know. So I listened to this guy sharing his story, like another 2 hour thing I watched on 2x speed. And I mean, it wasn't just all the prophetic. Like I kind of assumed that the problem that Shawn had was exaggerating the prophetic, but that's
bad enough, to be honest.
It is bad enough. But when you hear the other accusations of like sexual, it's weird that you said there was like a joke about the band member, who like would expose himself. I mean, exposurism or whatever it's called sounds like masturbating around other people consistently. I mean, it's just crazy. I want to say that's impossible, but as someone who is actively part of a sex addiction recovery program, there's no amount of craziness that I've heard from real people living real harsh reality, sometimes involving imprisonment or suicide attempts or whatever. It's just nothing shocking anymore. And so when I heard all that, I'm like, man, this guy's just dealing with a gamut of really, really considerable character defects, including an addiction to sexual perversion. And
and so in that case, the fact that he clearly was not forthcoming with his sins publicly, and since the institutions that platformed him and he was associated with were not willing to be honest and forthright about his significant negative influence on people, we needed a Mike Winger to call him out because he was present tense still hurting people with these prophetic words and this sexual deviancy. So it's kind of like, I hear what you're saying, David, and I agree. I find that very repulsive too, the sort of Pharisaic attitude, or my entire ministry is just built on looking for, finding, and calling out heresy. But it does feel like, in a way, in the internet age, in the influence age, in the platform age, if the institutions continue to fail us and not reveal these things when they need to be revealed, then somebody kind of has to, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have to do it, and but then it's going to, you're talking about the institution. You mean churches, missions, whatever. But I think it's going to cost you, and that's what you have to embrace. You have to embrace. Okay, we are all going to suffer from this. That's how it goes. Unfortunately, there's not many times I think about this, how we lost this ministry in this amazing part of Asia. because of
Yeah.
this, and I'm so, man, it's such a bummer. We were at such a amazing thing going there, and but it's the reality of what happens when leaders have moral failures. So the other part of this is I'm going, man, I better be really careful. Like they're talking about how they had a culture of, like they called it kind of like a college dorm culture, where they were just, after the conference, they'd all be drinking beer and smoking cigars and that kind of thing. And I'm thinking, man, I want to be super straight edge about my behavior. You know what I mean? And not think, because I think it's in little things like that it happens. It's little compromises like that. And as a leader, you really have to have a super high standard for yourself in your private life. You know what I mean? It's not just what I'm doing on stage. And then at the same time, if I'm in a leader of more leaders, and I see something happens, I need to have like one of the comments made is, I'm not good at confrontation. You know what I mean? It's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
What kind of leader is that?
But I think this is an important thing to dig into, because in agreeing to a degree with what you said about heresy hunting and how I don't like that, the risk is to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because what I think we need is a biblical vision of what holding each other accountable looks like, even publicly, right? I think that's kind of what needs to happen is we need to, as you often say, if I feel led to confront someone, first I need to look at the log in my own eye. I need to go before God in prayer. I need to make sure my motivation is right. And then, as you often say, with tears in my eyes, I need to call out my brother, even if it's public, because if I don't have access to them in that way. And so there's a posture and there's a version of this. Look, I think we talked about this, and maybe you think it's silly or whatever, but there was this example where, and it was in a totally different universe of, quote, sins, but where Forrest Frank called out Corey Asbury for his video that he made. And, he went online and he basically said, look, bro, you made this video about a serious time in my life where he broke his back. And it was hurtful. I didn't like the way it was, it came across. I felt like you took a very serious moment in my life. And I just want to say that, and he basically modeled what that looked like. And then Corey came back and was like, bro, I'm sorry. Like, and maybe the whole thing was a PR stunt because all of a sudden now they're doing a bunch of stuff together.
Yeah.
But the point in that is that what I think it did, at least on some level, is demonstrate what good public accountability can and should look like, which is it's not accusational in a bad way. It's not self-righteous and sanctimonious. It was humble. It was even self-deprecating on some levels. And so I think we need to retain a culture where we hold each other accountable just in the right way.
Especially people of public ministry. And, the Apostle Paul did that. He was very, he'd say
letters to be written, in letters to be read publicly to a bunch of people.
Right. And he would just name these different dudes and say,
don't hang out with Epaphroditus. That guy's right. Dude.
Herodias.
One of the tools in addiction recovery work is that you reach out to someone who knows who's a part of your group, who you trust, before you're going to do something stupid. Like, because if you reach out to them before, the odds are very high that you're not going to go through with it. And so I think the prayer for me is like, if more leaders could recognize and disown themselves and just come forward and admit, like have a humble posture, like if that started happening, like, guys, I'm really struggling. I'm sleeping with someone else's wife. I'm so convicted by the Holy Spirit. I need, whatever the thing is that I feel like
it's a pretty big thing, but yes.
Yeah, I was going to say that's your start.
All right. But the internet, I think that what's hard in all this is that Bethel and Shawn and all these people are being called out publicly and are responding because it's like the masses, the opposition is so loud that you're forced into a reaction, or because if you don't react, it's just like, so now it's like damage control
Yeah.
Rather than, so now we'll never really know what a genuine repentant response
But again,
is.
I think that's why there has to be an inverse relationship to fame platform, where it's like I go into this knowing that the bigger my platform, the more hardcore I have to be about being honest. The more it's like I have to have this, like the bigger the platform, the more I just say, okay, that means X. That means I can no longer do this. It's like people would like malign the Billy Graham rules, but I think that was part of him going, I have to have hardcore rules in place where we do not tolerate X, Y, and Z, where we are almost overly honest quickly, because we recognize that the bigger my influence, the more the compounding damage of my silence is. The bigger the level, the bigger the devil, as they say.
That's right. That's right.
That's a good one.
So the moral of this story is be careful what you wish for, man. Everyone wants that prophecy about them, speaking of prophecies about how they'll reach the whole nations and be the biggest thing, whatever. And I'm like, man, I don't know. That you got to be real careful what you wish for, because first, it's not all that it's cracked up to be. And second of all, the level of criticism that you receive that's even unfair is crazy high. And then as you are human, as you bring more people into the mission, I almost think it's inevitable things are going to happen. It's not if, it's when. Are you then prepared to pay the cost of exposing that publicly? Because that is a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, but I do think we should ask God to use us in powerful supernatural ways. I know you believe the same, Ben, and
I just don't think we always know what we're asking for.
But we need to say, but that means that I have to let the character be developed in me to handle that kind of platform. And it's like everyone wants a big platform, but they don't want the cost that goes with it. And I think when you're a spiritual leader, it's 100 times more than someone who's in the world, right? Mm-hmm. Because in the world, they're all doing all that kind of stuff that Shawn is talking about, but it's okay. Yeah, you know what I mean? Maybe not some of it. Well, no, probably. But the point is not that. The point is when you have the devil's trying to get you, he's a roaring lion looking to see who he's going to devour. That's the language that's used. Mm-hmm. And the devil. And so when you have a big platform for God, a spiritual platform, man, it's rough. And then we as leaders, and if we are if we're in a relationship with someone and we know that something has happened, we have to be willing to go, okay, this is going to hurt us all, but I have to bring this out. Or we have no integrity as a church or as a mission or whatever it is that we're doing.
Yep. So on that note, Chad, I have a confession to make.
No. Yeah,
it'd be terrible. Yep. No, that was great. David, thanks for landing the plane here. And we're going to...
Wait, there's no confession?
No, there's no confession. You're perfect. I'm perfect. We're all perfect. No confession. Not this time. Maybe next time. Maybe the next episode will be nothing but confessions. But in the meantime...
I do have a confession, actually. Do we still have a minute or no?
I got a confession to make. What's it? What is it?
The best way to get a response from someone who is being non-responsive to you is to send them this short text message. I apologize for offending you, period. You'll get a response every time.
Really?
Yes, what about if you send them, or you could send them this shirt?
Really? You'll not get a response for that. Yeah.
I'm going to try
I apologize for offending you.
All right, let's move on.
David's random story.
I know a lot of our listeners know that when I started out ministry, one of the things that I did is I was in the
YMCA?
No, the Yugoslavian army.
Were you the sailor or were you the biker?
I was in the Yugoslavian army, and I just want to say that I didn't see you boys there.
Well, yeah, I was, like you said to Luke yesterday, just a nad in the universe or whatever.
A nard.
So when we were fixing, there's a big earthquake, and I'm just leaving out details, but
which has never happened, by the way.
I was in this brigada, and we were like fixing houses in this Yugoslavian army thing. And so then we're working on this road, because mostly we are working on like broken down houses, like because in an earthquake, it's like a heavy shaking and then everything falls down.
Oh, is that what happens in an earthquake?
Yeah. And so then you have like, especially down there, because they're all made out of like They're not made out of wood. It's made out of like
chisel
Cobblestone.
stone.
like mud that they dry on. They take mud and they lay it out on the road and they dry it. And they make
we
bricks.
don't need these details.
They make
Nobody
bricks out
cares
of
what
it.
the houses are made of. When was this? 18-2?
So,
How long is this?
I repent for
So-
taking that phrase the wrong way.
really? So I don't know. I'm like, we're fixing this road because the road was.
Oh, you're fixing the road.
I know. So what I'm trying to explain, what happened. So I'm fixing a road and then this guy goes, I said, what are we doing?
Why are you laughing?
I don't know.
Because I
So
can't get 8-2 out of my head and fixing a road.
So I'm fixing this road and then this guy goes, I said, what are we doing? And he goes, it's a road to a nudist colony.
I've been to one of those.
I'm like, wait a minute. We're fixing a road. I mean, there's like all these people living in tents because of the earthquake and stuff. But they thought as one of their priorities that they should fix this road to a nudist colony.
Well, yeah, they don't have shoes on.
That's
It's hard to
that's
walk on the
admirable.
road.
And I thought, I was saying to Ed, who was with me there, I said, we probably.
Who was
we're
your?
supposed to be-
I love how you said Ed, and then you said who was my.
But so I feel like maybe we shouldn't, we're supposed to be missionaries. Maybe we should not
I don't want to
be repairing a road to a nudist colony. So we just went to the commandant and said, hey, would it be cool if we didn't fix the road to the nudist colony? And he thought that was hilarious. But he did take us off nudist colony road detail and put us back on house fixing detail. And so when you're in a compromised situation like that, for example, all you have to do is talk to the leader and say, hey, would it be okay if I do something else? And that way you won't destroy your life, your ministry, and your future.
Yeah.
I'm not a scientist, but I'd imagine that scenario is probably a little too specific to be applicable.
What do you mean?
I mean, I'm just pondering a guess here, but perhaps the average listener will not run into that scenario. But I could be wrong. And if they find themselves building a road to a nudist colony, they know there are options.
Yeah, you're off if you're doing that.
That reminds me. So what most people don't know is that we live in a little beach town in New Zealand when I was in high school, and we still have our house
Well, we
there.
still live there.
Just let me finish.
Well, you never get to the point. So you're doing to me what
The loin doesn't fall far from the limber. It's called peka peka. And what people don't know is that I don't know what we say, maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles down the road.
Hey, Bert, I live in Peka
is
Peka.
actually a nudist beach.
Oh, really? That's true. I forgot about
Gonna
that.
be naked.
And one of the things that we used to do is
Chad, shut it.
my friend Pete had a quad bike, a 4-wheel bike, and we would go down the road and I would chuck water balloons at the people. He would go zipping down and I'd huck water balloons at
were they really water balloons or were they pee balloons?
No, we weren't that.
Now you're gonna have to.
I'm not like
edit that
like
out.
the Costa Rican gang that you
Really
rode around with, or wherever you lived. All right, are you
That's a
done,
beautiful
David?
story. You're gonna have to edit Chad out, but
The official shirt of the episode is
How do I get edited out for saying pee balloons?
Ride Your Own Pony. It's the shirt of the day.
We're gonna start a new merch store, and that's gonna be the first shirt. Oh man,
we need to make these shirts.
right? Yeah, we do. No, I know. I'm already on it, David. All these are gonna be present at the gathering in a couple of months.
Good. All right, that's it. All right, well, thank you guys for listening. Send in your comments, concerns, or just general criticisms to luke@steiger.org. For everything else, you can go to Provoke Inspire Podcast to find us on socials. Our email address is provokeandinspirepodcast@steiger.org, STEIGER.org. We love you. Keep it real. And if I can find the end button, we're going to end this episode right now.
Thanks for watching Provoke and Inspire. If you enjoyed this content, could you do me a favor and hit that like button? Leave us a comment because this ultimately is a conversation. Hit that bell thing, I think, right? And YouTube seems to be recommending another video for you to watch. Check it out. Stay involved. Also, ProvokeAndInspirePodcast.com for everything else. That's it. Peace.